Welcome to another episode of Casual Learning. I'm your host, John Bannan. What's the deal with Christian honesty? Does a Christian have a moral obligation to deal with others in an honest fashion? And the answer is yes, they do. What does that mean? Well, if you go to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, we'll start at verse 33. Jesus says, "Again you have learned how it was said to our ancestors, 'You must not break your oath, but must fulfill your oaths to the Lord.' But I say this to you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, since that is God's throne, or by the earth, since that is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, since that is the city of the great king. Do not swear by your own head either, since you cannot turn a single hair white or black." And this is the important part. All you need say is yes, if you mean yes, no, if you mean no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one. So in Matthew 5:37, Jesus is saying, say yes when you mean yes. And then he says, say no when you mean no. And then he continues to say that if you don't follow this, anything you say is coming from the evil one. Anything else you say is coming from the evil one. It's evil. If you don't speak plainly to people, honestly, and simply communicate your decisions or your intentions or your answers, you're sinning. It's evil. So Jesus is setting forth a principle that Christians should live by, which is when you communicate with other people, your communications and your answers should be simple and honest. You don't have to complicate things. Say yes if you mean yes. No if you mean no. Everything else is just sinful. It's evil. Its motivation is coming from somewhere else. And it's easy to understand why Jesus would say this, because if you care about other people, if you love your neighbor, and you ask somebody a question, or you need some information from somebody, what do you want from them? You want a clear, simple, honest answer. You don't want a bunch of nonsense or beating around the bush or cryptic language that you can't quite interpret or understand because the person's hiding something. You don't want that. You want a nice, clear answer, something you can rely on. You're not treating another person kindly or as a Christian when you don't answer their questions simply and honestly. And oftentimes you are causing them far, far more problems than you think you're solving by not giving a simple answer. In this passage, Jesus talks about don't make oaths and just say yes or no. And why is that a problem? Because back then, oaths could be used as sort of a trick to get out of what you were saying. Sort of like, I'm going to cross my fingers behind my back while I'm telling you something, which, in your mind means, well, whatever I tell you may not be true, but I can't be held responsible for telling you it because I have my fingers crossed behind my back, as if that's like real or that's legitimate. It's obviously not. And they were doing the same thing 2,000 years ago. They would use oaths to get out of things that they said, claiming that the oath didn't hold them responsible. You can see that in Matthew 23, verses 16 to 17. I'll read that for you. Jesus says, "Alas for you blind guides, you who say, if a man swears by the temple, it has no force. But if a man swears by the gold of the temple, he is bound. Fools and blind, for which is of greater worth, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? Or else, if a man swears by the altar, it has no force. But if a man swears by the offering that is on the altar, he is bound. You blind men, for which is of greater worth, the offering or the altar that makes the offering sacred? Therefore, when a man swears by the altar, he is swearing by that and by everything on it. And when a man swears by the temple, he is swearing by that and by the one who dwells in it. And when a man swears by heaven, he is swearing by the throne of God and by the one who is seated there." So Jesus is saying, you can't play these sort of tricks to get out of lying. Sorry, that's not honest. You can't hold your fingers behind your back when you tell somebody something. You've got to be simple and honest and truthful in your answers. That's what Jesus is saying. And if you don't do that, you're committing sin. It's evil. I'm amazed at how many Christians don't answer simply and honestly and clearly to questions or to situations. And this is sinful behavior. Very simple. For a Christian or a Catholic who, takes their faith seriously, they also need to take the idea of Christian honesty seriously. It's something Jesus said. He was very specific about. You just can't ignore it and pretend as if it's not a problem, because it's a big problem you may have. And But Jesus doesn't make any exceptions for business people. So, when you're talking or communicating in business, you're still bound by Christian honesty. Just because it's business doesn't mean you can't sin. You're still subject to God's law. You can still sin. Absolutely. There's no exception for businesses. So there's lots of business people who claim to be Christians or Catholics and who won't tell you the truth because it's a business context. Somehow they think that they're exempt because it's a business. No, you're not exempt. Not at all. It's a sin. You got to go confess it. So, plain and simple, honest communications. What does that mean? That means say yes when you mean yes, no when you mean no. Everything else is from the devil, from the evil one. So you don't beat around the bush with people. Give them the honest, straight truth. Tell them the truth. There's a lot of people who are very passive-aggressive. They don't like confrontation. It makes them very uncomfortable. But they're not willing to give up on whatever it is they want to do or force, despite the fact that they don't like confrontation. So they may resort to trickery or manipulation to get their way. Not honesty, not Christian honesty. They're not using that. And oftentimes, it's because they want their way. It's their will that they're interested in pursuing, not God's will. And, when you're not pursuing God's will, you're pursuing your own will. That's the definition of evil behavior. I mean, the definition of good is God's will. Whatever God wants is good. If you're not doing God's will, and you're doing your own will, and you're not doing what Jesus told you to be simple and honest in your communications, well, that's evil. It's simple. Plain and simple. And just because you're a business person doesn't mean you're exempt from that. So, Jesus is prohibiting manipulation. Don't manipulate people. If you have a problem with somebody, confront them directly. Some people, don't be passive aggressive. Some people, they want to manipulate people into doing whatever it is they want. Behind that person's back, they don't know what's going on. But they'll set up a circumstance that makes that person, think of something. They think it's their own idea, but the truth is it's not. It's the manipulator's idea. He figured, I put you in this situation, you're going to come up with this idea on your own. You're going to think it's your idea, and you're going to do it. Right? But it's not your idea. It's the manipulator's idea. Well, that's a violation of basic Christian honesty. You can't do that. That's a sin. And their justification may be not so great, which is it's their idea, but they know you're not going to do it. But if it's your own idea, you're going to do it because you think it's your idea. Maybe it's just to serve their own purposes, whether those purposes are, well-intentioned or not. Doesn't matter. It's still a sin. Maybe they don't like confrontation, but they're going to manipulate it nonetheless to get what they want. Maybe the whole situation makes them uneasy. They don't want to talk about it. But nonetheless, they're not going to drop it. They'll try some other method of communicating with you this idea or getting you to do what they want instead of being honest, plain and simple in their speech or telling you the truth. But a lot of people think that it's okay to do this because they're not hurting anybody and there's no ugliness involved. And what difference does it make? Because ultimately a good thing happens. And it's for your own good. Well, those are all excuses. At its core, it's simple. Simple behavior. Period. You're not supposed to do that as a Christian or a Catholic. Um, that's the type of behavior that non-believers engage in constantly. They don't have any qualms about what Jesus said because they don't believe in Jesus to begin with. They'll do that anyway. Used car salesmen, huge manipulators. Can they sleep at night? Yeah, a lot of them can sleep at night. They're not Christians. They don't care. But as a Christian, you really shouldn't be sleeping at night well if you engage in this sort of passive-aggressive, manipulative type of behavior, regardless of whether you think it's well-intentioned or for the better of whoever. You shouldn't do it. It's sinful. Don't do it. Don't engage in double speak. You say one thing, but you really mean another. Don't do that because you're masking what you really think or what you really want to say. Or maybe, you get somebody else to tell so-and-so something because you're too chicken to tell them yourself. Well, that's a manipulation. That's also not honest and simple. It's a violation of basic Christian honesty. You're not supposed to do that. Period. You're not helping that person. You may think you are, but you're not. And 9 times out of 10, you're causing them a heck of a lot more problems by doing that. Because now they got to figure out what's going on. What's going on? Am I crazy? Is somebody doing something behind my back? I don't understand what's going on here. And this person could misinterpret what it is you're trying to do and why it is you're doing it. They may see it as a very evil intent. You're trying to hurt them. Maybe you're not, but they may take it that way for whatever reason, because you're not communicating, you're not explaining what it is you're doing and why you're doing it, and you're certainly not giving them an opportunity to talk to you, to communicate with you and find out what your problem is and why. And maybe the problem can be solved simply, but you're not giving them any opportunity to discuss it with you because your mind's made up and you don't want to hear anything. That's not Christian. That's not Christian at all. That's evil. Don't do that. A lot of people, even Christians and Catholics, some have this strange notion that Christianity is equal to being nice. Christians should be nice. Being nice and polite is the hallmark of a Christian. All right, being nice, polite. Do you think that? That's not true! No, that's not the hallmark of a Christian. This is the hallmark of a diplomat. But that's not the hallmark of a Christian. That's a hallmark of somebody who's well-bred, mannered, in a civil manner. A civilized person. Sure, being nice, polite is a civilized person. But that's not the hallmark of a Christian. That's not what Christianity is. Jesus never said, thou shalt be nice and polite. He never said that. Not once. He said you should love your neighbor as yourself. But that doesn't mean, the way you love your neighbor is by being nice and polite. You could be nice and polite and be stabbing him in the back all the time. Or maybe you're not being nice at all because you should tell him something. But you seem to be nice on your face. You could be two-faced, I don't know. But clearly that is not what Christianity is. Christianity is doing God's will in accordance with Jesus' teachings. And Jesus' teaching is not to, gotta be nice and polite. It's not his teaching. In fact, when Jesus went to the temple and overturned the tables of the money changers. He wasn't being polite and nice. Not at all. Why would you do that? Oh, that was not polite. That wasn't nice that you turn over those money changers' tables and have all that money spill all over the place and attack the temple like that. Jesus, he was not saying be polite and nice. He was saying do God's will, and he was upset with the fact that the money changers were in the temple, essentially engaging in thievery, which was, usury, because they're exchanging money so that the pilgrims can donate to the temple, but they were taking a fee, so he considered that evil. So he's upset about the evil going on right in front of the temple where his father, God, had his presence. It had nothing to do with polite or nice. It had to do with evildoers in the house of God, and that's what upset him. So the hallmark of Christianity is love. Love of God, love of neighbor. It's not being polite and nice. If you love your neighbor, well, could you be polite and nice? Sure, you could. Sure, it might be conducive to loving your neighbor by being polite and nice, but it's certainly not a requirement. You don't have to be polite and nice in order to be a Christian. Christianity has an element of confrontation in it, and basic Christian honesty does entail confrontation on occasion. It does. You want to tell somebody something, and they're not going to like it, but you got to tell them. Be truthful, plain, simple, honest, and truthful. Say yes when you mean yes, no when you mean no. Don't beat around the bush. Tell them. And if you don't have the nerve to tell them, you don't want to tell them, then don't act on whatever it is you wanted to tell them. Because unless you have the decency to tell them to their face, and that's going to involve confrontation, you shouldn't hold it against them. You shouldn't take action against them. Behind their backs or manipulate them. That's wrong. That's evil. And it's not Christian. Not at all. It can be tempting for some people because they've gotten so good at manipulating situations or manipulating people. They can't resist doing it, and they don't see the harm in it, or they're dealing with people who will never catch on that that's what they're doing, and it's so simple for them to do and so effective, so they do it because they get their way, and they think, there's not going to be any real harm that results from this, and maybe there won't be. And maybe it really is for that person's good. But, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Don't do that. Don't manipulate people. Don't be passive aggressive. Speak the truth. And confront people. Give them a chance to explain themselves. Give them that respect. That's a Christian virtue, Christian honesty. You want to be a Christian or a Catholic, you've got to do it that way, whether you like it or not. You can't be a used car salesman. There's no room for used car salesmen in Christianity. Those guys, they got a big problem. They're taking their cars to the highway of hell. That's what they're doing. Don't be a used car salesman. That is not a Christian ethic or virtue. It is not. Speak plainly, truthfully, and honestly. Christian truth or Christian honesty. It's in the gospel. You want to read it yourself? Please do. Okay. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Maybe maybe I'll address them in a future video, or I'll reply to your comment below. If you like what you hear, please press the subscribe button below. And, take care, guys.